In this nuclear episode of View Thunder, I'm stomping on miniature cities as I review the original 1954 classic, Godzilla. Welcome to View Thunder, curated movie reviews that celebrate art, design, and cinematic storytelling. My name is Kyle, and I thank you for tuning in. In the ocean just off the coast of Japan, a small freighter encounters a churning, glowing phenomenon from beneath the waves, and to the horror of all on board, the ship is destroyed and all souls lost. A massive hurricane slams into the island nation, destroying villages, and there are reports of a giant beast being sighted. Director Ishiro Honda, along with his co-writer Takeo Murata, from a story by Shigeru Kayama, waste no time bringing to life the fabled creature called Godzilla and the havoc it creates across the island nation. As the Japanese government does its best to escalate its defenses, the destruction wrought by the creature escalates as well. In the midst of all of this, an underdeveloped love triangle between Hideo, Emiko, and Dr. Serizawa. Emiko, the daughter of prominent paleontologist Dr. Yamane, is engaged to Serizawa in an arranged marriage, but she is in love with Hideo, who works on a salvage ship. In a key moment of the film, Emiko takes a reporter to speak with Serizawa, but he refuses to divulge what he's working on. But after the reporter leaves, he reveals to Emiko his terrifying invention and swears her to secrecy. But eventually, she has to weigh her promise to Serizawa against Godzilla's ongoing rampage. I went into this film looking for some cool monster action. What I found, and didn't expect, was the catharsis of a nation in mourning. Now, I'm not what you would call a die-hard Godzilla fan. And as proof, I offer you this. I think that Roland Emmerich's 1998 film is a blast.
You sure you didn't know about this?
No one told me anything about this.
Why do I even keep you around?
I've seen bits and pieces of the mini-sequels over the years, and some of the recent films I've enjoyed on their own merits, but he's not a character I have a huge attachment to. However, I did grow up watching Godzilla King of the Monsters when it would show on TV. That movie, along with the animated show from the late 70s that I enjoyed, right, Mom? And of course, his historic meeting with Bambi. What I didn't know back then is that the movie I was watching on TV was a heavily reconstructed and Americanized cut of the film, released in 1956, with the addition of some American actors led by Raymond Burr as reporter Steve Martin. Several years ago, I was given Godzilla King of the Monsters on DVD as a gift, and at the time, I hadn't seen the movie since forever. I was excited to revisit it, and when I did, I unexpectedly found that I just didn't enjoy it. It was restructured to make most of the film an extended flashback with Burr's narration and featured new scenes of him being placed within existing scenes. It all felt off in some way. Fast forward to just a couple of years ago, and I picked up Criterion's fantastic release of the original 1954 Godzilla. When I finally sat down and screened this version, it threw me. I wasn't prepared for how emotionally poetic the story would be. It was much more than just a simple monster movie. It was a time capsule of a nation in healing from serious wartime trauma. Whatever the mini-sequels and reboots to Godzilla have turned him into or watered down, this original film is much more than a giant monster spectacle. It's the post-traumatic historical record of a war-torn nation, simplified through science fiction. I screened Godzilla on a 1080p Blu-ray released by the Criterion Collection. The packaging is immaculately designed with an awesome cover illustration by Bill Sienkiewicz on the front of a heavy cardstock slipcase. The back of the slipcover features the standard clean Criterion layout template with all the specs and listing of supplemental content, which is extensive. The usual solid art direction by Sarah Habibi throughout gives this man-in-suit movie a respectable look, and I love the strong, imposing block letter title art. Removing the contents of the slipcase reveals a gatefold design with a cool pop-up Godzilla die cut that encloses both the plastic disc tray and a booklet featuring an essay by film critic Jay Hoberman. The movie is presented in its original 1:3:7 Academy aspect ratio, and the transfer itself isn't what you'd call a pristine image, but given the age of the film and the restoration work done on it, This release is fantastic and probably the best it has and will ever look. Criterion also has a huge box set that includes this film and the Showa-era sequels from 1954 to 1975. But if, like me, you just want the original film, this release is highly recommended. Godzilla was released only 9 years after the atomic bombings in Japan, and I guarantee you that everyone involved in the making of this movie, both in front of and behind the camera, had some sort of personal, intimate connection to the real-life, violent awakening to the atomic age. I found it difficult to put into words how I felt after watching this version for the first time, because it wasn't at all what I was expecting. Man-in-suit monsters stomping on miniature cities had been lampooned for decades to the point of parody. The cathartic relation to nuclear destruction and the Second World War caught me off guard. There are characters in this film that mention narrowly escaping the bombing of Nagasaki, and the testing of H-bombs is the entire reason why Godzilla is there in the first place. There's an early scene that I found really fascinating involving an angry debate about whether or not to keep information from the public or not. It was neat to see something like this included, especially with what's going on in the world today. There's one quick scene in particular that wrecked me. As Godzilla rampages through the city, smashing and setting fire to everything in his path, the camera turns to a mother and her 2 small children huddled in the rubble. She holds them close in anticipation of their impending doom, and the mother reassures them in a trembling voice that they will be where Daddy is soon. This particular shot is present in the 1956 cut, but the mother's line is not subtitled. It was the addition of this line that emotionally enhanced the entire moment for me. The proximity of this fictional violence to the real-world events the people of Japan witnessed could not be ignored. It was front and center in every creative decision. So many of these important references to the nuclear devastation inflicted on the Japanese psyche were carefully excised when exported, so as not to cast aspersion on the delicate patriotism of American audiences of the mid-1950s. Godzilla himself can be and has been interpreted in any number of ways. Often he is seen as a warning of nuclear proliferation in general. But on this most recent viewing, attempting to look at it from a Japanese post-war perspective, I thought maybe it could be seen as the United States itself. In the 1970 film Tora, 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 Admiral Yamamoto says in the wake of his successful attack on Pearl Harbor, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Godzilla is the cinematic embodiment of an awakened sleeping giant, and he is not happy. When Godzilla first surfaces, he does so because of underwater H-bomb testing. Now, did those tests create the creature, or has he been there all along and they just brought him out of a prehistoric slumber? Godzilla doesn't even come to shore until the Japanese fleet goes out and pesters him with depth charges. It's already sunk some ships, but did he mean to? He's a giant creature and could have done it by accident. Whoops, sorry. Then he shows up in Tokyo Harbor and is attacked again, so he comes ashore and doesn't really do a whole lot. He kind of walks across the land and destroys stuff, but only because of his immense size does he cause destruction. He's basically just passing through. I know there have been various origins told and used throughout the decades, but I'm judging this film and its story on its own merit. The destruction wreaked by Godzilla escalates with each new government response to destroy him. At one point, a massive electrified fence is built around the island. And when Godzilla is hit by that voltage, it's pretty obvious he's had enough and causes the worst amount of destruction as he razes Tokyo to the ground. An important element to this plot, which enhances the overall themes, is that one of the main characters, Dr. Serizawa, has created a sci-fi weapon he calls the Oxygen Destroyer, and is adamant that it not fall into the wrong hands. He invented it and isn't quite sure what it can be used for, but he knows that it can be perverted into a terrible weapon of mass destruction. He wants to keep it a secret and never let anyone know it even exists, yet despite the doctor's moral dilemma, his invention is ultimately used, and used effectively. This is just as much a metaphor for the advent and use of nuclear weapons as Godzilla is. But in this movie's reality, its creator chooses to destroy all of his research on it and ultimately sacrifice his own life in order to keep the Oxygen Destroyer from ever being replicated and used again. Thematically, what does this say about the use of such weapons, or even weapons in general? They're horrible until they're good. The gargantuan threat has been destroyed, but only through a series of violent escalations until finally one destructive force outdid the other. Which begs the question, what comes next? The effects work in Godzilla, while obviously dated, is really remarkable. The miniature work is fantastic, and cinematographer Masao Tamei shoots it all using deep focus and well-placed shadows with a hazy atmosphere that grounds most every shot. The best of it being when the monster is stomping his way through the city with impressive blazing fire effects or taking out a bridge. There are, of course, several shots that don't quite hold the illusion as well, including a helicopter getting knocked over by a storm or fighter jets bouncing along on wires. But this was the state of the art at the time. We've all heard the term suspension of disbelief, but I personally prefer willful immersion when experiencing any movie. It sounds silly, but it's less of a cynical choice in my opinion. I don't want to turn off my brain and merely suspend what I know. I want to engage with a movie and enhance my belief in the world the filmmakers are presenting me with. If they successfully believe in their world, then hopefully I will too. For a film nearly 70 years old, Godzilla does not disappoint. The Toho Company's Godzilla is an important film, not just because it introduces one of the great iconic movie monsters, but also as a fascinating time capsule of post-war Japan. I'm not saying you have to view it in this context. If all you're looking for is a good old-fashioned monster movie, you'll get a great one. But for me, I find a lot of value in viewing a film through the lens of when it was made, to willfully immerse myself in it. Of course, there is no right or wrong way. I just hope you enjoy it. And that's it for this episode of View Thunder. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed my review, please support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons below. And until next time, remember to always stay for the end credits.